Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone, uh, depending on how it applies. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the second of two Siddur classes with Rabbi Kimelman. Today's shiur is titled "The Song of the Sea," "The Song at the Sea as the Liturgy of the Exodus." How and why does Az Yashir revamp the crossing of the sea account in Exodus 14? Please note that this program is being recorded. Also, everyone is muted, but we welcome questions and comments in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of the presentation. My name is Noah Gradovsky. I'm a vice president of the UTJ. Before we begin, a few remarks and notes. Thank you to our sponsors for this webinar, whose names are about to be shared in the chat. And they include benefactor Juan Mesa Freidel in honor of Rabbi Reuven Kimelman, partner Douglas Hauer in memory of Ruth Gilad, supporter Dr. Yehudi Feldman in recognition of Professor Kimelman, Leslie and our friends Leslie Apollo, Rabbi Noah Gradovsky, that's me, in honor of everyone who has embraced learning with UTJ through our website and webinars, Dr. Stuart Hampman, Paul Slater, David Stanhill. And as I hit admit all once again, I'd like to thank everyone else who is joining us, as well as those who made a donation with registering for the program. For those of you who are new to UTJ, let me add a few words of introduction to our organization. The Union for Traditional Judaism, UTJ, is a group of rabbis, scholars, and lay people who advocate for a passionate, open-minded approach to Torah study and observance of Jewish law, halakha, rooted in classical religious sources and informed by modern scholarship. Our philosophy is distinguished by the symbiotic relationship between faith in God, the God-given Torah, and intellectual integrity, and our emphasis on the sacred framework of halakha as our unifying guide. Learn more about UTJ at www.utj.org. That link is in the chat. We are also pleased to be co-sponsoring this program with the Kaplan JCC. The Kaplan JCC on the Palisades is a welcoming home away from home for all who pass through its doors. Their 185,000 square foot building plus acres of outside grounds featured two fitness centers, an indoor indoor and outdoor aquatic center, group exercise, spin and Pilates studios, two gymnasiums, tennis and racket courts, indoor track and field, indoor track, a luxurious spa, multiple playgrounds and fields, and so much more. The JCC is a home to the renowned Thurnauer School of Music, Leonard and Sybil Reuben Early Childhood Center, Neil Klatskin Summer Camps, and the JCC Dance and Drama Schools. The JCC is also proud to offer extensive high-quality programs and services to adults of all ages, as well as to seniors and individuals with special needs. With that, let me introduce our speaker. Rabbi Professor Reuven Kimelman is professor of classic Judaica at Brandeis University and former rabbi of Beth Abraham Sephardic Congregation of New England. He is also scholar in residence at the Kaplan JCC on the Palisades. He specializes in the history of classical Judaism with a focus on the history of poetics of the Jewish liturgy. His latest study is titled The Rhetoric of Jewish Prayer, a historical and literary commentary on the Daily Prayer Book. And we are working on getting everyone who registered for these webinars a discount code for that. His other book is The Mystical Meaning of Lecha Dodi and Kabbalat Shabbat. Professor Kimelman's other writings focus on the interaction between Judaism and Christianity, on the ethics of war, and on his mentor, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And now, with thanks to Professor Kimelman for joining us today, I'll turn it over to Professor Kimelman, and we'll put some links to the source material in the chat, and we'll also be displaying that material on screen. Professor Kimelman.
Thank you, Noah, for the wonderful introduction. The session today actually introduces Pesach, since the theme of Pesach is Laman Tizkor Yom Tzeitcha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, Kol Yemei Chayecha, and apparently the first effort to do so is the song we're going to study today, the Az Yashir. We're going to study the Az Yashir as a liturgical expression to the crossing of the Red Sea. In other words, it is constructed for liturgical use. This is evidence already in how it appears in the Torah, which is brick upon brick. It's structured as a song in the Torah, evidence that originally it was sung, probably sung responsorially. We'll get into that later on as we find out the rabbinic understanding of the Az Yashir and how the Az Yashir is comparable to the Kriyat Shema. But let's begin with our analysis of Az Yashir itself by introducing the 4 verses which preceded in Exodus 14. Exodus 15, the Az Yashir, is in some sense a recapitulation of Exodus 14. Exodus 14 purports to be an historical rendition. Exodus 15 is a liturgical reenactment. Therefore, elements which appear in Exodus 15 do not appear in Exodus 14 are for liturgical needs. Elements which appear in Exodus 14, which do not appear in Exodus 15, are for historical background. The 2 chapters serve different roles and therefore constituted differently and focus on different aspects of the crossing of the Red Sea. Az Yashir is introduced by 4 verses which conclude Exodus 14. They are at the top of the page. Vayosh Adonai bayam hu et Yisrael Mitzrayim. So the opening line has the 3 major actors. They are God, Israel, and Egypt. Each one appears 1 time in that line. The next line goes, Vayayis from Mitzrayim metos fatayam. And Israel saw Egypt dead on the sea, or the coast of the sea. There, the word Israel appears, and Mitzrayim appears, but no mention of God. In line 3, it's Vayayis Gedolah asher asad Mitzrayim, and Israel saw the great hand that God did in Egypt. There again we have Yisrael, Egypt, and God. So this 3rd line goes back to the first line from the point of view of the 3 major actors. Each time the key verb is vayar, they saw. The last one says vayiru, ha'am et Adonai, v'yamina b'Adonai and Moshe avdo. So this now we have reference to Israel and to God, but the absence of Egypt. So in a sense, the 4 verses reenact. Egypt is prominent at the beginning. Egypt disappears at the end. The 2 stable factors are God and Israel. The amazing thing is the 4th line, it says Vayiru. So I mentioned last time, in your first reading of Vayiru, you would assume it continues the meaning of the word Vayar. He saw. Now don't forget, in the Torah text, there is no vocalization. Secondly, the song was originally heard, not seen. So if you hear the word Vayiru, you assume it's the plural Vayar, and he saw. Vayiru, though, means they feared. But you don't know it means they feared until you come to the object. The object says, Vayiru ha'am et Adonai. So you initially would read it, they saw. Then you realize theologically that God cannot be seen. So what your mind does is revamp its understanding and say, is there another understanding of Vayiru? And of course, by then, you come up with the word yirah, which is to fear or to revere. So God is revered, but God is not seen. But you plant the idea that God was seen, which then gets erased by saying that God feared. This is frequently done in literature, is where you plant an idea, you then erase the idea, the second idea becomes prominent, but the first idea never leaves one's memory. It's precisely the conversion of the 2, seeing and fearing, which emerge out of a single word, the way it's constructed. Now this is the beginning. So they saw and they feared. Now watch it. Saw and fear. So the song is going to focus upon fear, reverence, but also is going to focus upon the visible or the audible or the sensory and the appealing to the senses. So let's begin the song itself. It starts off Az Yashir Moshe, which all commentators focus upon the strange construction. Az Yashir Moshe, or should be Az Shar Moshe. Az frequently refers to the past. Yashir frequently refers to the future. But Hebrew verbs in poetry rarely follow the rules of Hebrew verbs in prose. So continually meet Az Yashir Moshe by focusing upon the past and the future. It may indicate continually, meaning this song should be sung continually. Moshe uvnei Yisrael et hashira zot. And who are they going to sing it to? Sing it to God. So I'm assuming that the opening line introduces its liturgical function, meaning this song is to be repeated, because you are to remember your exodus from Egypt, Kol Yemei Chayecha. Now, who's going to sing? We have two parts. We have Bnei Yisrael and Moshe. And that apparently explains the next two words, Vayomru Lemor. Normally, in a biblical verse, if you're going to quote something, the last word is Lemor, saying. Or you could say, Vayomru, and they said. A very strange construction is Vayomru Lemor, to have two verbs for saying. This is what induced commentators from Philo to Chazal to argue that there were two voices heard. In other words, this was said somewhat responsively. We'll go into detail later on. Some people even think it was said by two choirs, one male choir, one female choir. That's what emerges out of the Therapeutai of Philo and explains why Miriam, it says, Vatan lahem Miriam, and Miriam responded to them. To them is written in the male form, masculine. Vatan is the feminine. And therefore, even Philo argued that there were two choirs, one male, one female, and the voices came together at the end. Later on, we'll explain how Chazal read this. Let's go through the song as we go through. Starts off, Ashir al Adonai kiga oga. So the opening line is in the singular. Each individual is singing it. And what am I going to talk about? Sus v'rachmo ramavayam. So the opening line summarizes almost the whole song. And what is it about? The destruction of Egypt. Now, interesting, the word ga'o or ga'el, go ga'ah is a very difficult word to translate. People will translate like he triumphed gloriously. But what they miss is the allusion. The word go'eh is also used in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, when the water overcomes its edges and surges upward. So you have a double meaning here. It could be he triumphed gloriously, or he triumphed gloriously by the upsurging of the water, introducing how it took place, what's coming up. So the word ga'o ga'ah is chosen specifically for its double, maybe even triple meaning. I will sing unto the Lord, for he surged up victoriously. And I use the word surged up to mean, I want you to allude and visualize the waters coming up, which introduces exactly what's going to happen. So what's his response? Azi v'zimratya v'hi li Yeshua. So he tells you specifically, Israel was saved, and what's the response to the saving? A song. Therefore, this line legitimates the Az Yashir, meaning we were saved, Yeshua, and what's our response? A song of praise. So your opening lines tell you what's going to happen, just don't tell you how. So Aziv Zimratya Vahili Yeshua. So God was my salvation. My response is to sing to him. What is going to be the content of that song? Next line says, Ze'eli Van Vehu El Heavi Varomenhu. Clearly, here is a parallel structure. So Ze Eli is parallel to El He Avi. Anvehu is parallel to Aromenhu. So therefore, the Anvehu can only be understood to mean I will praise him. Maybe even mean I will beautify him. In any case, I will say good things about God, since Anvehu has to be parallel to Aromenhu. So all the interpretations which say Naveh is based upon the establishment of the Beit HaMikdash from the word Naveh would be premature. The structure of the line Anvehu, Va'aromenhu are parallel phrases, and therefore I'm going to speak beautifully and praise God gloriously. Good. Now line 3. Hashem ish milchama is a very difficult expression. Does it mean that God is a man of war? Or is it like the phrase Baal milchamot that we have in the Siddur? Really means God is victorious at war. Ish milchama means he competent at war. Now then we have Hashem Shmo. Now this is very difficult, only for the simple reason that normally Hashem in the Yud plus Hey plus Vav plus Hey is taken as Midat HaRachamim. And here it almost doesn't make sense. So in fact, there's one midrash explanation which says Hashem ish milchama. Is that possible? No. Hashem Shemo, meaning the underscore the Rachamim. But we know from Exodus 3 that the name of God first mentioned there is Yud plus Hey plus Vav plus Hey is related to the verb Yehiyeh or Ehiyeh. So probably the name of God means that which causes to be. So he tells Moses at the burning bush, Az Yashir cannot possibly mean I am that I am, since it doesn't answer Moses' question. Rather, Az Yashir, I will be there, or I will cause things to happen. Therefore, God says in Genesis, my name was not known to them, meaning I did not fulfill my promises. Now my promise to redeem the forefathers and their descendants is coming to fruition. So frequently the name Yud plus Hey plus Vav plus Hey refers to God as implementing promises. So here we have Adonai Mishmachama. His name is Yud Hey Vav Hey. And what does God do? He brings it about. What did he bring about here? Victory. So the two lines in line 3 go together. God is competent in war. Indeed, his name is he causes things to be. Therefore, he accomplishes them. Now we go back to line 4. We have to see who's involved here. So line 4 has Markavot Paro Vechelo. Two elements, Paro and his army. What did he do? Yara Bayam. He threw them into the water. Umifchar Shlishav, and apparently the best. Now, Shlishav apparently refers to the Egyptian chariot, which had 3 people involved. Could be the driver, one with a spear, and one with a bow and arrow. So that could be the word shalosh. Other people think Mifchar Shlishav means the best of his officers. Tub'u b'yamsuf. All of them sank in the water. Now who sank? Paro v'chelo, Yaravayam. Then the parallel structure is Mifchar Shlishav Tub'u b'yamsuf. So Markavot Paro v'chelo is parallel by Mifchar Shlishav. Yaravayam is parallel by Tub'u b'yamsuf. So again, we have the structure of A, B, A, B. And the second part repeats the first part by specifying it. Frequently biblical parallelism, the second line will specify the first line. So here it says, Markavo paro v'chelo. How do we specify that? By saying, Umifchar Shlishav. Then it says, Yara vayam. Give me a more specific or graphic description. Tubu b'yamsuf. He threw them into the water. Tubu, they sank in the Yamsuf. Tubu gives it more specificity. The word Yam, sea, is general. Yamsuf tells us specifically which Yam. So we have the standard parallelism in which the second part specifies and provides greater detail than the first part, almost as if the first part said something, and then you said i.e. So let's read it that way. Markavo paro v'chelo yaravayam. I.e., what does that mean? It means mifchar shlishav, the best of his chariots. What happened to them? Tubu b'yamsuf. They sank in the Yamsuf. Now line 5. The opening word is tehomot. This is a very strange word, tehomot. We know the word tehomot from the story of Noah. We also know in the creation narrative, the world is created b'tohu vohu. Tehomot, tohu. Now, Breshit, the first chapter, is how we go from a water amorphous shape into a construction of the world. In other words, first chapter of Breshit moves from chaos to cosmos, from the lack of structure to structure. Noah is like a video played backwards. The structure of the universe reverts back to its watery element at the beginning. And there the phrase tehomot. So by using the word tehomot, I get an allusion to the Noah story. What's the Noah story? The land was structured and reverted back to water. What's the story of the crossing of the Yam Suf? The water and the land were separate, just like in Noah's story. And then the water overcame the land and everything was sunk and drowned. So in a sense, we can argue that the phrase tehomot is alluding to the fact that the reversal of land and water and structure to chaos is here in miniature what if there was an extreme form. Now this is a second allusion to the Noah story. The first allusion to the Noah story goes back to the birth of Moses. Moses is placed in a teva. The word teva appears one other time earlier in the Torah, referring to Noah. Noah walked into a teva. Moses was placed in a teva. So the fact that the Exodus story alludes to the Noah story is evidenced by these two sources. So we should read the word tehomot in line 5 as referring to a miniature flood. And therefore yichasyumu, just like there the waters covered the earth, here the waters covered Pharaoh. Yardu bimsalot kamo even, and they went down like a stone. Now look at the word yichasyumu. It's amazing how many times a verb ends with the word mu or mo. Now why does it do that? Well, classical biblical scholars will say it's an archaism, and they will find evidence for such a phenomena in Ugaritic poetry. The trouble with the word archaism, it doesn't explain anything. All it tells you where it came from. So we want to know, why is it used here? Not why is it used in Ugaritic poetry. What's specifically here? So here yichasyumu. So later on we're going to follow the word mu throughout the song and see what it refers to and find out its function in this song here. In the meantime, we have everybody going down, bimsalot, kamo even. They went down into the depths like what? Like a stone going into the water, meaning they met no resistance and probably hit bottom. Well, what can you say about a thing like this? So this phrase is praise. Verse 6, Yamin Hashem naribakoach, Yamin Hashem teratz oyev. Now watch it. This line gets repeated. And if you go down the text, you'll see another green line. Ad yavoramcha, am yavorezu kanita. It's very likely that the repeated lines were probably a congregational response. Congregational responses are normally either short or repetitive. So here you have the phrase, Yamin Hashem. Now, interesting, if the Yamin, the hand, in chapter 14 refers to Moses' hand. It's Moses' hand which does everything in 14. It lifts the staff, splits the sea. But in Az Yashir, the hand of Moses becomes the hand of God, as if to say behind the hand of Moses is the real hand of God. And what is it? Yamin Hashem, Nadari Bakoach, is expressed in power. Yamin Hashem, Teratz Oyev. So the Yamin is repeated twice, which is common in responsorials where the congregation is given a line and the line gets repeated, makes it easy to memorize, and everybody knows their part. So you say Yamin Hashem Nadari Bakoach, Yamin Hashem, Teratz Oyev. Each part has exactly 4 words. The beginning of each part is Yamin Hashem, your right hand, O God. And the next is an expression of power. So Yamin Hashem, Nadari Bakoach, Teras Oyev. And again, we have the word Oyev. Follow the case Oyev. When is Oyev used rather than just Paro? Now, line 7. Ubarov Goncha, Taros Kamecha. Now, line 7, Gaoncha, should evoke back to the line 1. Ki Ga'o Ga'a. There, God was Ga'o Ga'a, and now we use the word Gaoncha. Some statement about God's power, God's glory, God's strength. But it's not the translation, it's the word Gaoncha reverts back to Ga'o Ga'a. And by tying the two together, I now specify Ashiru Hashem Ki Ga'o Ga'a. Now I specify by saying Ubarov Gaoncha. Now, Rov does not mean a majority in biblical Hebrew. Rov means the abundance of. Mordechai hayaratsui larov echav. It doesn't mean 51%. It means the multiple of his brethren. So, barov goncha, what did you do? Taros kamecha. Now, this is interesting. You destroyed whom? Not the enemies of Israel, but the enemies of God. And this provoked the Midrashic comment that the enemies of Israel become the enemies of God. This developed later on theologically that anti-Israel is really anti-God. And the Midrash develops a theme that Judeophobia is really an expression of atheism, something which should be developed in a later lecture, which I hope to give. In the meantime, line 7, Barov Goncha, Taros Chamecha. You destroyed your enemies, those who come up to oppose you. Tishalach Charoncha. Now Charoncha, which is now anger, parallels Goncha. But the reason he uses Charoncha is Yochleimo Kakash. Your anger will consume them like fire. So we have Vayichar Apo, as if the nose gets red with anger, frequently comparable to fire. And here we specifically use it, a different image. It's fire consuming straw. Tishalach Charoncha, Yochleimo, will consume them, Kakash, like a fire consumes straw. So did you oppose your enemies, which means you did it with ease. It took no. Okay, so what happened? Line 8. Uvaruch apecha. Now, ruach apecha goes back to charoncha. Charoncha is your anger, your rage. Uvaruch apecha is the snorting of the nose, a very visible expression for divine anger. Uvaruch apecha, the snorting of your nose. What happened? Nermu mayim. All the waters swirled up. Nitzvu kmo neid nozlim. They stood up like a wall, but a wall of water. Now, neid nozlim, both words begin with a nun. Neid nozlim, they go together. Now, normally a neid, a wall does not flow. So we're putting the two words together as two opposites to create a new image. Now, why would a wall of water? Kaf'u They froze. Tehomot. Now the Tehomot goes back to the line 5. Tehomot, the depths, in the midst of the sea. So this is quite remarkable because we move from the Af of God and the Ruach. So you have a very visual image of God, as it were, snorting, causing the water to stand up like a wall, like a flowing wall, or frozen in the midst of the sea. So the multiple images here, all trying to capture what the seeing of the waters looked like. After all, this is a reenactment for liturgical goals. As a reenactment, it has to visualize, because only by seeing it do you feel it. Liturgical reenactments, the point is to visualize, allowing you to see it and respond emotionally. Now, line 9. Amar Oyev. Now, this is twice where the enemy is called Oyev. It should have said here Paro, Amar Paro, Oyev. I wouldn't be surprised if the choice of the word Oyev is specifically to allow the song to be sung in opposition to future enemies. So if you specify Paro, it's only Paro. By saying Oyev, you allow this to allude to future enemies of people who are out to destroy Israel. So not only Paro said it, but Paro becomes a symbolic Oyev. Now watch what he says. Erdof, Asig, Achalek Shalao, Timleba Nafshi, Orik Karbi, Torishema Yadi. Now, we have 6 expressions here, all powerful. 4 of them begin with an aleph, which is the person I myself. Erdof, I will pursue. Asig, I will catch up. Achalek Shalal, I will divide the spoil. Timalema Nafshi, my desire will be satiated. Arik Charbi, I will unsheathe my sword. Torishema Yadi, my hand will destroy them. Now, if you look at biblical commentators here, they focus on what they think is a mistake, because they argue that it's out of order. And some people say, well, sometimes that what is most important comes first. That's the way of getting out of it. But if you read it poetically, it's understandable exactly what's going on here, because the last 3 expressions end with E. Timalema nafshi, orik charbi, torishema yadi. In other words, poetry operates by sound, not by mind alone. So I get all 6 verbs in, but I juxtapose the verbs which sound alike to intensify the impact. So Paro says, Erdof. Now watch the person. It's a one person, not Egypt. He speaks in the first person. I will personally slay them. Erdof, Asig, Achalek, Shalal. That's the first 3. Then look at the sound. Timleima nafshi, orik charbi, torishema yadi. So if you hear this and you do D, E, 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 you can hear Pharaoh's voice. And his breath is right on your neck. At this moment, you think, what? You're dead. Instead of being dead, look at line 10. Paf, nashafta, buruchacha. I just thought it was on the verge of what? Being pierced by a sword. Orik charbi, torishema yadi. I can feel his hot air blowing on my neck. And in 1 second, I thought, what? I'm dead. And suddenly, nashafta bruchacha. Now, the word nashafta, you have to do the word nefesh. It's a metathesis. Nashafta. Now, say the word nashafta. You cannot say the word without taking in a breath. Nashafta. So the word sounds out its meaning. God blew at them. I would say, with the duchacha, he puffed at them. And all it took was a puff from God, kisamoyam, and the water covered them up. And the water covered them up. What happened? Sangalu, koferet, b'mayim adirim. Now, what does Sanlenlu mean? There's almost no agreement among the translations of how to explain the word Sanlenlu. It sounds like it comes from mitzilot, a word which you had before, as it says in line 5, bimsalot. So that means the depths of the sea. But why the phrase Sanlenlu? So the best explanation that I know was given by Beno Jacob, a Jewish commentator in Germany before the Second World War. And he says, Sanlenlu is an onomatopoeia, meaning you are imitating the gasping sounds of a person drowning in the water. Sanlenlu. As he's going down, he's gasping for water. So the word Sanlenlu is onomatopoeic. You can hear the sound and the gasping of the water. But they went down. Keoferet b'mayim adirim. They went down like lead. B'mayim adirim. And the word mayim adirim goes back to the previous usage of the nature of the water. So beforehand, line 5, yardu bimsolot kamo oven. They were oven. Here, Sanlenlu, instead of oven, is koferet. Instead of saying bimsolot, we have Sanlenlu b'mayim adirim. Now, if you were there and you thought you'd be dead within a second, and you can feel Pharaoh's breath on your neck, and he just unsheathed his sword, and suddenly he went down rather than you go down, what would you do? If not, say verse 11. Mi kamocha be'elim Hashem. Mi kamocha neder b'kodesh. Who is like God? And of course, the answer is nobody. Now, remarkably, as how many biblical scholars use this verse to argue that ancient Jews were not monotheistic. The Mi kamocha be'elim. Who is like you among the gods? It's a little bit strange to say that, because you cannot derive theology from poetic expression. Poetic expression is not interested in verbal precision. Poetic expression is interested in emotional reaction. Therefore, there's a poetic license, and you rarely should derive theology from poetic expression. In any case, mi kamocha is repeated twice, just like line 6, yamincha, yamincha, mi kamocha, mi kamocha. And of course, the answer is nobody is like you. And then we have 3 expressions, and I put mi kamocha be'elim Hashem, mi kamocha neder b'kodesh. The answer is probably is nobody. Nobody is like this. What the exact meaning of neder b'kodesh is very difficult to explain. You can explain each word separately, but apparently it has a poetic meaning, which is parallel to norati lot osef fele. Norati lot is also difficult to translate. We don't know exactly the grammatical construction of Nora Tilot is a smichut, osef fele. So apparently all these are expressions of overwhelming surprise, expressions of amazement. It's not quite sure that grammatically they can be properly deciphered. Nedor ba'kodesh, the structure is peculiar. And what does kodesh mean here? Nora tilot is a nora shel tilot, is a smichut form, is it adjectival? What is quite clear is the last 2 words, oseh fele. So all I'm saying is these expressions are to evoke wonder and the intensity. So the opening is mi chamocha, who is like, and the answer to that is nothing is like God, since God is nedor ba'kodesh, no ratilot, oseh fele. The last 2 words are wondrous, so therefore I assume that the 2 previous expressions are expressions of amazement, of God's overwhelmingly presence, but the exact translation has not yet been properly deciphered. Okay, now line 12. What did God do? Natita yamincha. Oh, that word yamincha, number 12, goes back to number 6. Yamin Hashem. Here's natita yamincha. And all you did was what? Stretch out your right hand, and you swallowed up the land, meaning the water overcame the land. The next, what you do? Nachita b'chasara. And then you led, right, in your graciousness, the people that you redeemed. V'nahalta. And you led them azacha and your power to where? El neve kachecha. Now follow closely the use of the verb natita. Go back to line 10. The first verb is nashafta. Line 12, natita. Line 13, nachita and nahalta. we got 4 verbs, almost parallel construction. Nashafta, natita, nachita, nehauta. You can see, and you can see the progress. Nashafta is what? You puffed, and they fell in the water. How'd you do this? Natita, by stretching out your right hand. Now follow closely. But then you took care of the people. Nachita b'chastacha, the people that you redeemed, you didn't abandon them. Nachita, you continue to lead them as an expression of your graciousness. And where did you take them? Nehauta b'azacha el neve kachecha. And you brought them to where? Neve kachecha. Now the phrase neve kachecha is open to great debate. There are 2 schools of thought. One school of thought refers to Sinai. One school of thought refers to the Beit HaMikdash. Those who say it refers to the Beit HaMikdash argue that the song was written very late, because there is no Beit HaMikdash for a couple hundred years. Not only that, in the book of Genesis and Exodus, there's no ideal Beit HaMikdash. Even Leviticus has no single Beit HaMikdash. The idealization of a central home of worship is an expression of Devarim. It is not an ideal. In fact, in Genesis, people have mizbachot all over the place and pray to God. The Mishkan is portable and moves around. The idea of a permanent Beit HaMikdash is an expression of Devarim. Therefore, it's unlikely to be referenced here in Exodus. So what can Neve Kachecha refer to? Therefore, it more likely refers to Sinai, because there it says Hagbeil, and the word Kodesh is used with regard to the mountain, meaning nobody should go up to the mountain, and here they hear the blowing of the shofar. So Neve Kachecha, the word Kodesh can refer to Sinai, can refer to the Mikdash. Historically and theologically, in this context, it more likely refers to Sinai than the Beit HaMikdash. So, you led the people, b'chastacha, you graciously brought them where? To Sinai. Now, this would also explain the next couple of verses, because the next couple of verses is the response of the peoples of Canaan. It says, Shamu amim yirgazum. And I put a colon there, because that's to introduce the next couple expressions. Shamu amim yirgazum is all the peoples what? Shuddered. What happened? First, Chil achaz yoshvei Palashet. Fear grabbed the residents of Paleshet, meaning Philistine. Then, Az nivhalu of Edom. So now the chieftains of Edom, they were scared. Elei Moav, the leaders of Moab, Yochazemot, are also grabbed by shuddering. Namogu ko yoshvei Canaan. Now Rabbeinu Bachya argues that there's an order here. So line 14 says Yoshvei Palashet. The Philistines are on the west coast of Israel. Southern west coast is Philistines, identified with contemporary Gaza. Then Nivalu Edom, he argues, is the east coast. Other side of the Jordan, on the south, is Edom. Then Moab is going further north. So you have the east, the west, the north, and then you say Namogu Koyesh Canaan, and all the residents of Canaan. So he argues the names are not arbitrary. They refer to 4 geographical points. The first one on the west, the second and third on the east, going north direction, and then you conclude with Kol Yoshvei Canaan, meaning everybody, all the Canaanites, east, west, and north, all of them were scared to death. What happened there? What fell upon them was awe and the fear of you. At what? At the Gedol Zracha, at the power of your arm. Going back to the arm. Yad, Yamincha, now Zracha, even more powerful. And what happened to all of them? Yidmu ka'aven. They were petrified like stone. Yidmu, petrified. So all these people were scared to death, petrified. And watch the next line. And this makes very much sense to the next line, because the phrase repeats twice. Ad yavoramcha Adonai. Ad Yavor Amzu Kanita. Why is it mentioned twice? Because the crossing of the Jordan in chapter 5 of Joshua borrows from the language of the crossing of the Red Sea. It is used in a very similar manner, and both of them use the word Ad Yavor. So there are two expressions of Yavor, entering from Egypt into Sinai, and exiting from Sinai into Israel. And in both cases, God was protectively the people of Israel. Now, the crossing of the Jordan, we don't know much about, simply because it never got a song which was liturgicized. And there was a crossing of the Red Sea, and the crossing of the Jordan is ascribed in the Bible in similar terms. One is well known because it got liturgicized, the Az Yashir. The other never got liturgicized, and therefore is not well known, which shows you the power of liturgicizing a biblical incident. It guarantees its memorization and pervasive knowledge of it. Okay, now 17. Tivi emo, v'tita emo, barnachladcha. Again, we have mo. Machon l'shift up out Adonai, Mikdash Adonai kani yadecha. So if Navei kachecha refers to the Mikdash, it's very likely that Machon l'shift up out Adonai, Mikdash Adonai kani yadecha, that Mikdash Adonai refers again to Sinai. Although it could refer to the Beit HaMikdash, it could most likely refers to Sinai, because the idea that the Beit HaMikdash Konenu Yudecha was built by God, not by Solomon, is a little bit strange. In any case, how do we end the phrase? Adonai Yimloch Elam Va'ed. This is why some people call this an enthronement psalm. But in any case, the conclusion is that God is Melech. Now watch the key phrase mo. Mo, mo, mo. So if we go to, it starts off, let's follow through. We'll start with line 9. Line 5. Talmot Yichas Yumu. Who's the mu? Here the word mu refers back to the Egyptians. Then if you go to line 9, Timul Ema Nafshi refers to Pharaoh. Line 10, Kisamo Yam refers back to the Egyptians. Line 12, Tivra Mo refers what? Back to the Egyptians. But now follow closely. In line 15, Yochazemo goes back to Moab. And line 17, remarkable, Tivi'e Mo, Vita'e Mo refers to what? Israel. So the use of the word Mo is not just archaism of Ugaritic poetry, it's help you to indicate what is happening, what's at the center. So it moves from the focus upon Egypt and Pharaoh to the focus upon the peoples of Canaan, and finally the focus upon what? Israel. 17. Tivi'e Mo refers to Israel. Tita'e Mo refers to Israel. So this song, which tries to reenact the Exodus from Egypt, to make it alive in order to recall the memory of the Exodus and recall the Exodus by singing a song which is live. And what do you mean live? We can re-experience our salvation. And therefore the words, Baruch Haka, Nashafta, you puffed at them at the moment when I thought I was going to be penetrated by a spear or shot by a bow and arrow, I suddenly was saved. And that act of salvation provokes the song, a song of glorification of God, using the word ga'o, ga'a, ga'oncha. And we conclude by saying, Adonai yimloch elam va'ed. Now, I want to conclude by showing how this is interpreted by the liturgy. So look at the next page. This is remarkable. In Arvit, we actually have an interpretation of the liturgy, and it follows three interpretations in Tosefta Sota. How was the song sung? So we have three possibilities in Tosefta Sota, also found in the Mechilta, and also alluded to in the Gemara. But the first is Rabbi Akiva's position, that it was a litany. And you look at the black part, it says, whatever Moses did, Israel responded the exact same way. Ashir Hashem, Ashir Hashem, Ashir Hashem. Just like we have the psalm and we answer Hodel Hashem Kitov, Ki Le'olam Chesdo. So the line develops it through, but the congregation responds by using the exact same words. Ki Le'olam Chesdo, Ki Le'olam Chesdo, Ki Le'olam Chesdo. Here the same thing happened according to Rabbi Akiva. How do they sing the song responsively? Israel responded, Ashir Hashem, Ki Goga. That's the first position. The second position is Rabbi Eliezer Beno Rabbi Yossi Aglili. He says, Kekatan shekorei et halel beveit hasefer. Now what happens? They did it repetitively. Means Moses would say a line, and Israel repeated the exact same line. This is the way it's done frequently in a congregation. The Chazan says a line, and repeat it. So you got two models. First model is the congregation responds by saying the exact same thing all the time. Ki le'olam chesdo, Ashir Hashem, ki goga. Second position is, whatever Moses says, we repeat it. But Nehemiah, the third position there, says it's like they say the Shema in the synagogue. What do you mean they say the Shema in the synagogue? That they split it. Moshe would say half a line, and the people would say the second half of the line. And apparently the Shema in the synagogue originally was said two-part voice. Moses says something like Shema Yisrael, and the people responded, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's one possibility. Now what's remarkable about this is the Shema is understood as Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim. And therefore we reenact the Shema the way coronation acts were done in the Roman Empire, which had two choirs, and the two choirs together would complete the verse. Choir A would say the first half, choir B would say the second half. So in a synagogue, the Chazan would say the first half, for example, Shema Yisrael, and the Tzibur would respond by saying Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Now let's go up to the Mariv service, top of the page. There it says the following. How does Mariv take it? V'ra'u banav gurato. So his children saw expressions of his power, and they praised him. And then it says, watch it. U'malchuto b'ratzon kiblu alehem. I'm in line 2 there. So this is an expression of Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim. Malchuto is kingship. B'ratzon, willingly, there was no mountain over their head. Kiblu alehem, because the expression is Kabbalat Malchut. Now, how do they do it? We're not talking about the Shema here. We're talking about the Az Yashir. So look what it says here. Moshe uvnei Israel lachanu shira b'simcha rabah. Moses and the people of Israel anu shira. Now, anu shira means to sing the song responsively. To sing the song responsively, just like Rabbi Nehemiah says in Tosefta Sota. And what did they say? They sang the song responsively. When it came to the line Mi Kamocha, they all said it together. V'amru chulam Mi Kamocha be'elim Adonai, Mi Kamocha nedav hakodesh, norati lo t'sefereh. So the Mi Kamocha was the communal response. So what they would do is, Moshe would say a line, Israel would say the next line, Moses say line 3, Israel says line 4, Moses says line 5, Israel says line 6. When it came to Mi Kamocha, they all said it together. Now, then it says, U'malchut Reuvenecha, and your children saw Malchutacha, right? By the fact that you split the sea before Moses was an expression of divine kingship. Now follow closely. Ze Eli Anu. What does that mean? So go back to the song. Let's go back there. Back up to the first page. Suddenly the song will become clear. On the first page, what does line 2 say? Part 2? Ze Eli Van Vehu. So if you say they said it responsively, Then Moses said, Ashir Adonai ki gogo, sus v'rachmor v'ayam, azi v'zimmer yavir lishua. All this is in the first person. That was Moses. Then Israel responded by saying what? Ze'eli vanvehu, Elohei avi aromenhu. So that line is what is alluded to in the Arvit service. So go back down to the next page, and you'll see what over. So it's a line 4 says Ze'eli, that line, anu. They responded. So don't forget, there's a two-part voice. They said it. Now Vamru, but everybody together said Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed. So according to this, the whole song following Reb Nehemiah was said responsively. The two lines were said by everybody because they are the two key lines in the song. The first one is Mikamocha. That is, nobody's like God at all. And what do you say? Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed. So in a sense, it's functioned just like Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And the word Echad could mean Mikamocha. There's nothing like God. Only one like it, one possibility. And Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed is the first expression of Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim. Therefore, Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed in the mouth of ancient Israel is equivalent to the Shema in the mouth of contemporary Israel. Therefore, the Arvit service reenacts the Az Yashir, and its interpretation follows Rabbi Nehemiah, that the song was said responsively, with the key two lines said all together. And they are Amru Kulam, everybody said together. Now you can't say Amru Kulam unless previously they said it separately. What do they all say together? Mikamocha. Then it says, Machut Haruvanacha, Boker Yam Fnei Moshe. What happened? Israel responded, Ze'eli, which is the first response of Israel. Vamru. And the last line is, Adonai Yimloch Elam Va'ed. So what you do is, you condense the whole song by summarizing it through the first response and the last response. The first response was Ze'eli vanvehu, and the last response is Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed. Thus, the Arvit song, the Arvit prayer, summarizes the Az Yashir by using its opening response and its concluding response. And this happens quite often. So, for example, in the Musaf of Shabbat, we say Shema Yisrael, and then we conclude the Musaf by saying Hashem Elokechem Emet, meaning we refer to the whole Shema by saying its opening line and by saying its closing line. Thus is indicating the whole thing. Similarly, Az Yashir is indicated by its opening line, response, Ze'eli, and its closing line, Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed. And therefore the Az Yashir serves in Exodus the way the Shema serves in the contemporary liturgy, and one is modeled after the other. That summarizes our position on Az Yashir as a liturgical reenactment of the Exodus from Egypt to bring the people to the conclusion, Adonai Yimloch Le'alam Va'ed. Okay, more than happy to entertain comments or questions.
Thank you, Professor and Rabbi. And we are happy to entertain questions. I'm going to grab a couple that I noticed in the chat. And if you'd like to add more questions to the chat, I'll keep an eye on that. And if you'd like to be recognized and unmute, we can go that way as well, as long as it doesn't get out of hand, which thus far in our program.
One time, right back. Keep talking.
Okay, so now I'm in the stalling for time section. So let me mention that we will send out video from this program once that is crunched together. That video will also include, that email with the video will also include links to a lot of resources from the UTJ and our publication, The Kosher Nexus, regarding Pesach. The UTJ Viewpoints website has lots of articles, and you can search, you can browse by a holiday or by different points of interest. And so we have lots of articles there, as well as the Kosher Nexus has its annual newsletter and FAQ and everything you ever wanted to know about Pesach, but were afraid to ask. So those are all great resources. And hopefully will help everyone have a meaningful and kosher Passover. And again, those links are all in they're also in the email you got reminding you of this program. And let me again thank the all our sponsors, and I'm going to put those names back into the chat. I'm going to include in what I put in the chat a link for feedback. So if you'd like to provide feedback for the webinar, we are very happy to receive that. So that's going in there. And so you'll see that already in the chat. I do want to, of course, thank Rabbi Kimelman, but I guess I should do that while he's right here. And also thank the JCC on the Palisades for co-sponsoring with us. And having successfully and hopefully sufficiently stalled for time, let me open with a question that Sarah Brooks put into the chat about the dating of the Song of the Sea. And she wrote that she thought that it was understood as one of the oldest pieces of text from the Torah, although if we take some of the references to being the Beit Mikdash, then that would change things. So just Rabbi Kimelman, some thoughts from you on the dating of Az Yashir.
Well, those who think that the word Kodesh refers to the Beit Mikdash, scholars argue that means it's very late. Classical commentators, even though they adopt that position, some of them say it was a prediction of the Beit HaMikdash. I think both interpretations are incorrect. Number one, because in Exodus there is no ideal central place of worship like a Beit HaMikdash. And since the word Kodesh also refers to the Hagbel, the limiting of the people of going up to the mountain, therefore it's clearly that the word Mikdash can be nothing more than sanctified area, not necessarily temple, and therefore the possibility that this is a very old song, evidenced by the archaisms of Ugaritic, may show that it's one of the first expressions of fulfilling the mitzvah, Laman Tizkor Yom Seitcha Eretz Yisrael Kol Yemei Chayecha. The function of liturgicizing this is to fulfill the commandment of keeping the memory of the Exodus alive. So the possibility of it being quite early, I think, is very strong. The possibility of being very late, I think, is weaker.
Thank you for that. It was someone asked in the chat if you know offhand. If not, we'll try to follow up by email. You quoted a midrash that reads Adonai Yishmel Chama Adonai Shemo as kind of a give and take of the suggestion of God being known as an Ish Milchama and saying no, God is known as a God of compassion. Do you know offhand the citation for that midrash?
No, I think it's in the Mechilta, but if you send me, I'd be glad to send you the source for it. Right?
Okay,
In other words, they take it, Hashem Ish Milchama is a question. How can that possibly be? No, because his name is Midat Rachamim.
Okay, so we will work on getting a source for that, and including that hopefully in the video comments and as well as in email communication. And then we had a question asking what cantillation in Exodus 15 guide any unique meanings for its verses?
Please repeat that.
So I think it was a question of whether any cantillation of in Az Yashir guide our understanding of for meaning of the verse.
Could the person who asked the question give me an example of that? I'm trying to refer to what would be an example, or what kind of question are they asking?
In Exodus 15:15, where the word nam gu is, I see a strange cantillation.
What do you mean by cancellation?
Cantillation, a musical note.
From the word namogu? Oh, you mean the
Namgu.
cantillation of the
Oh,
song?
Namogu. It looks like a bar and then two sideways dots.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in cantillation. There are people who specialize in it. The cantillation is an extraordinarily sophisticated punctuation system, much better than periods and commas because it tells you how much to linger over the words and how to sound them out. So the cantillation is a way of trying to express in vocal form what appears in only visual form. But I one time took a course on the subject, but I don't want to comment. I'm not an expert in cantillation, and one would have to be in order to properly respond to your question.
Okay, thanks.
If I may, Rabbi, I wanted to kind of question what you were saying about reading what we have as the description in Ma'ariv as necessarily consistent with Rabbi Nehemiah's view, in part because each one of the three views mentions responsiveness. So I wonder how clear we can be that any of the anu in Aravit is meant to be particularly consistent with Rabbi Nehemiah's view, especially as you mentioned, sometimes it's hard to get too many details uh, out of poetic literature, which I assume we would include this description as in Arvid as being poetic as well. So I wonder if you have any
Yeah,
further.
good question. We're explicating though the last line. The last one says Ze Eli Anu. So we're translating as they responded, and Ze Eli refers to the line Ze Eli Van Vehu, which, if you have it responsively, turns out to be Israel's first response. That is Moshe Shet Ashir Hashem in the singular. Ze Eli Van Vehu is what the Israel responding to that. And the last response is Adonai Yimloch Elam Va'ed. So in other words, it assumes, number one, it was said responsively. By responsively, I mean they did not just repeat what Moses says. So the two first suggestions is they said one time, the same thing all the time. Ashir Hashem Kiga Oga. But here it says Ze'ili is a response. And the other one is they repeated every line he said, but that would not refer to Ze'ili. Ze'ili is the initial response of Israel. Therefore, it's the best way of accounting for the data is that the song is summarizing the Az Yashir by giving its opening response and closing response. And Israel participates in both, because Ze'ili is their own response without Moses. Adonai Yimloch Elam Va'ed is Moses and Israel coming together on the downbeat. So the data is best explained this way. It counts for more of the data than the alternative explanations.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. I'll give a last call if anyone has any questions. In the meanwhile, Rabbi Kimelman, you often ask what surprised anyone or things like that. I wouldn't say surprised, but I really appreciated at the very beginning your framing of Az Yashir as kind of the first memorialization of the history of Yetziat Mitzrayim, which is a somewhat obvious point, but sometimes we don't think about those obvious points, and so we don't move forward with them. So I just appreciated that framing of Az Yashir a lot.
Yeah. It's a kiyum of Lam Tizkor, Yom Seid Chamer Mitzrayim, and it fulfills that. We say Az Yashir every day. By the way, any other elements which people found surprising? I always like to get responses on where people say, "Oh, that's really surprising." Anybody have other responses add to Noah's comment?
I see Sarah's raised her hand, which is far more polite than we usually are.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to go ahead and unmute, please.
I was surprised by the connection to the Shema, and so I will approach this part of the liturgy now very differently than I ever have in the past. Before it was just like a nice musical tune that I liked, so that's great. I also want to recommend a book called Yizkor by Yerushalmi. It talks about the function of memory as a core element of Jewish theology.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. It's a great read.
Right. No, and by the way, it fits right into this. Fits right in. And by the way, Nathan Young, my friend, emphasized the word neramu could also mean swirling to get the visual element here.
On that matter of Namogu, I'd just like to make a contribution. The trap appears throughout the Torah. It's called as a Kev Gadol, and it appears throughout the Torah. It is not a rare trop.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other comments, things that surprised you? If not, oh, yes, I think Yoni.
Yeah, I want to say I loved the connection to Noah. I knew the Talmud was a reference to Bereshit, but I didn't put that together with also the reference in Noah as well. So that was very cool.
Thank you. And Nathan, once again, going with a polite raise of the hands. Did you learn nothing from Sarah?
Thank you. I was surprised that Salulu was a word. I forgot what exactly what it meant, but it was a word that doesn't have an agreed. I assumed that it was a word that we knew what it meant, and in my head I had read it as when I started knowing more Hebrew, I thought that maybe it was like Saladu, like I'm being pushed, like Yad Soleret Bo, the hand being pushed away, and it appears sometimes in a high holiday pew team. And then I remember looking, it says, nope, it's not Saladu, it's Solalu with its Sadi. And I didn't realize that it's a word that it's unclear what it means so much that I forgot who it was, said that maybe it's Adamanapiak.
Yeah, that's Beno Yaakov. Beno Jacob is a biblical commentary about the 1920s. His book is translated to English, I think, by his son, who was I think, a well-known rabbi in America. But the point is, it's Tzanglu is onomatopoeic, means I think it's gasping for air. You go Tzanglanglu. You can almost feel it going down. And if that sense, it's an extraordinarily powerful verb, and it fits in to the idea of visualizing, number one, and two, emotional response, like nashafta b'ruchacha, which I translate as you puffed.
I want to appreciate Yoni's comment in particular. I always find it amazing how many words there are that we might think are very obvious that, maybe we don't really know what they mean in so many places. And I just, shameless plug, put into the chat an article I wrote based on Hagon Rav Shaul Lieberman's thoughts on the meaning of the word Pesach. If you ask any school child, the word Pesach means passed over. But it ain't necessarily so, and there are other translations and understandings out there. I particularly like Rav Lieberman's take of to hover over or protect, which I think is a really beautiful metaphor that takes God not just as having skipped over destroying the Bechorim of Bnei Israel, but actually of having acted as a protective barrier for Bnei Israel, which I think is a beautiful image. So more of that in an article I wrote a while back, but it's an example of how many words, like just our common parlance words in the Torah, that we don't necessarily know what they mean, and there's different ways of understanding it, and so much more to learn about even what we think we already know.
If I can just correct myself with an edit, the trop Zokef Gadol that I was referring to appears in Parshat Mishpatim, Exodus chapter 24, verse 10. Vayiru, that's an example of a Zokef Gadol. It appears throughout the Torah.
Thank you.
Just knowing your last
yes,
comment.
I think I was thrown off by the vowel O right next to the cantillation mark. I thought they were one cantillation mark, but it's a O vowel and then the cantillation. So that's what made it unique to me. But now I get what you're saying. Thanks.
Thank you. Rabbi Kimelman, I'll give you the last word.
The word Passover was created by a man called Tyndale. He translated the Bible in the 1500s into English, and therefore was martyred by the Catholic Church for making the Bible known to the populace. But he created two expressions. One is Passover. Almost every other language pronounces the word Pesach in their language, Pascha. In Spanish, you have it. In French. Only in English do you have the word Passover. But the Midrash quotes the verse in Isaiah, and the word Pasach is parallel to the word Yagain. Yagain means to protect. So the Passover should probably translate as watch over, because he didn't pass over the houses of Israel. He watched over the houses of Israel, and therefore the mashchit did not enter. So may you have a hashgacha dika Pesach.
Amen. I delivered my closing remarks as the stall for time, as Rabbi Kimelman needs to step away. So I won't bore everyone with that once again, but I will say again, thank you to Rabbi Kimelman while he's here to hear it. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and wishing everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a wonderful and meaningful Pesach. May it be a harbinger for Geula for all of Bnei Israel, and in particular those who remain hostage in Gaza.
Amen. Amen. Chag Kasher V'Sameach.